Welcome everyone to the Thursday series. Jon Taylor is with us today. He has been doing this for years. I was trying to remember exactly how long it has been, but it's been years, and the topics are always so relevant and useful. I take lots of notes. And so, what do you have for us today?
We're going to continue our series on what is maturity in a relationship. And I've been exploring this for now through um, developmental models. And so we looked at Eric Erickson's model last time. And today we're going to look at Lawrence Kohlberg's model. Now, the models that I'm picking, these aren't necessarily the most research backed, most proved valid models. These are kind of the origin models in
Okay.
psychology. These are the ones you learn about in grad school because it's like a lot of psychological theory comes out of these basic models that have been improved upon and researched and criticized as time goes on. So maybe if this series continues to hold my interest, I'll share some of those later stage models that have had a little more research and a little more scientific rigor put to them. But so we're going to look at Kohlberg's model of moral development, and I'll start with a story. And this is the story that Kohlberg presented to his people he was researching. Um, it's called the Heinz dilemma. And there was a man named Heinz. His spouse was very, very sick, and was in need of this medicine that a pharmacist in the same town had made. The pharmacist, it cost him $400 of raw materials to make this medicine that he sold for $4,000. Heinz, knowing that this medicine would save his partner's life, gathered all the money he could together, and he could only come up with half. And he goes to the pharmacist and he says, "I only have half the money. Would you accept half, or can I pay you the rest later? My partner really needs this." And the pharmacist said, "No, I've made this medicine. I'm going to make money off of it. Cannot have it." And so Heinz goes home and decides to rob the pharmacy, and Heinz steals the medicine. Now, the question that Colbert asked was Heinz right to steal the medicine? And he noticed three groups of answers. For younger folks, Kohlberg says, 8 years and younger, they would always say no. He was not right to steal the medicine. Stealing is wrong. For older folks and teenagers, younger adults, they would say yes, he was right to steal the medicine. However, he should be punished because it was against the rules. And then the third group, these were older adults, and they would answer, it's ridiculous that Heinz couldn't get access to the medicine, so no, he should not be punished. And or yes, he was right to steal the medicine, and he should not be punished. And so what Kohlberg broke out was six distinct stages of moral development, and they fall into three categories. The first two stages is what he says is pre-conventional morality. The first stage has to do with avoiding punishment, and this is our moral reasoning is based on direct consequences. So there's authority figures outside of us. Think when you're, small, kindergarten, preschool age. There's teachers, there's parents. You do a wrong thing, you get a timeout. The second stage is self-interest. And that is our actions are seen in terms of rewards rather than moral values. So I keep the rules, I do the right thing because I get the star on my chart. Um, the teacher's not mad at me. It's good for me because I benefit. The second grouping he calls conventional morality, and the third phase is the good boy attitude, the good boy, good girl attitude. Good behavior is living up to social expectations and roles. So there are rules and norms. You score points, you get kudos, you are seen as good to the degree to which you can keep those rules and adhere to societal expectations. Um, the fourth stage he calls law and order morality, and this is there are societal laws. There are things that we all must adhere to, or it doesn't work. So in law and order morality, I adhere to the laws because the whole system doesn't work if I don't. The third grouping and the fifth stage is social contract. Rules are seen as social agreements that can be changed when necessary. So you think of this in relationships where generally we agree to talk to each other about money that is spent. However, there can be some situations where both of us agree, yeah, we have this rule that says over $200 we should talk to each other. But I can see the jam that you're in. We can see the jam that you were in. You spent more than $200, but you were right to do so, given the circumstances. And then we have universal principles, which is the sixth stage, and this is moral reasoning is based on universal ethical principles and justice. So ideas like fairness, justice, compassion, which would say basically it doesn't matter so much what the rules are and are not. What matters is alignment with these universal principles. So you can see how with the Heinz dilemma, depending on where you may be in your worldview or where you may be in your moral development, you will see the situation differently. You'll answer it differently. Going into a little more detail on how these developmental stages relate to maturity in a relationship. As I was reviewing these this morning, my wife is in a graduate program to become a therapist now. And so in preparation for this, I asked her, what do you remember about Kohlberg's moral development stages? And she said, am I supposed to have this memorized? And I said, no, I know about it. I'm thinking about it because I've looked it up recently. Like, I think I got introduced to this in graduate school or undergrad, but no, it's not front of mind all the time. So she's looking this up and we're reading through them. And it hit me from my orientation as a PACT therapist, the psychobiological approach to couples therapy. Each one of these stages of moral development provides a backstop, provides a safeguard in couples ordering and governing themselves. So I see, maybe if you divide them in half, roughly in half, I see the earlier stages when we have an understanding of order in a relationship, or the must do's and the do nots in a relationship, that is based on there are rules, there are laws, we can't get away with things. That keeps the bottom from falling out. And that's very, very important. For some of you on the recovering from addiction side of things, early in recovery, your biggest motivation for not relapsing may have been, I don't want to get in further trouble. I don't want to have to, disclose more information. I don't want my spouse to be mad at me. There's nothing inherently wrong with that being your backstop. In fact, when I look at how couples function, the more stress we get under, the more primitive we are in our thinking and feeling. So to have an understanding of your agreements, your arrangements in your relationship from the standpoint of right and wrong, crime and punishment, how does this benefit you directly, I think is really powerful. It's good. In fact, when I help couples make agreements with each other, the first thing I check for is, do both of them have a compelling personal reason to keep this agreement? Not because I think that's the highest and best way to think, but because I want to check when it hits the fan and things get really stressful, are they likely to keep the agreement to each other? And the more personal benefit you can see for yourself in the agreement, the more likely you are to keep the agreement, even when life is getting tough. So when some problems I see in relationships that come out of earlier stage moral thinking. For those of you who are on the betrayed spouse side of things, how often have you said to your addicted and hopefully recovering spouse, do you only feel bad because I confronted you? Do you only feel bad, or you only seeing there's a problem because I said there's a problem? With someone who is in those earlier stages of development, authority is externalized. So this isn't an excuse for them, but it might help us understand why you're having that experience. yeah, you don't seem to see a problem unless I speak up about it. For this person, the authority may be externalized and they're waiting, maybe not even in a nefarious way, but they're waiting to see what can I get away with, what's inbounds, what's out of bounds based on the. So while it may keep the bottom from falling out, running a relationship strictly on earlier stage moral development, I think is exhausting. It's a lot of work. It's a game of cat and mouse. And I think often leads to a lot of resentment, especially for people who are inhabiting a body that looks adult and want to be treated like adults and want to feel like adults. Um, it's really, really hard to run a relationship just on earlier stage moral development. Um, in earlier stage moral development, too, we also tend to see behaviors as good or bad based on what the immediate outcome is. So, how often do I hear from somebody, whether I'm working with them individually or in a couple, oh, I can't talk to my spouse about that. They will be angry. Or I've tried to set that boundary, but my spouse is so mad. You can hear the earlier stage moral development there. I'm not going to do that thing that might be helpful to me because the immediate result is unpleasant. So, that thing that I could do that long term, with some insistence, with some fortitude in my boundaries, could actually help my partner learn that there are limits, learn that I am serious, that thing that is initially unpleasant. If I'm more aligned with earlier stage moral development, I'm going to say it was bad early on, it was bad in the beginning, therefore it's not helpful to me. In earlier stage moral development, we don't have a personal code of morality. Again, authority is externalized. We're looking for other people to tell us whether things are right or wrong. um, Scaffolding of that in early recovery, this is where I think it's really important to have a sponsor that you can get a hold of almost at a moment's notice, to have other people firmly in recovery that you can run things by, because you may not have a developed enough code of morality, a developed enough sense of what actually is right or wrong, not definitively, but in a relationship. So talking to somebody who comes from a different vantage point, hey, what do you think about this? I was working with a client the other day. Among other things, he's working on enmeshment issues, and he got a very long letter from his grandparents that was like, this could have been a letter from the mafia don, saying you only have so much time with these boundaries before we stop loving you, essentially. And to this guy's credit, I think he's in earlier stage moral development, which doesn't surprise us with addiction and stuff. To his credit, he picked up the phone, he talked with his sponsor, he talked with support people, he talked with his spouse. Um, he gave them access to the letter and he said, I'm spinning, what do you think? And these people who love him and are there for him, they had good perspective, they had good advice, and it helped him to kind of pinpoint. And then when he and I worked together, I said, now how do you feel about this? And that initial, like, let me check in with the people that I trust. We talked about how that was, he was looking for the resonant tone. He talked to his religious leader who said, we owe our parents everything, your grandparents are right. And he said, I love my religious leader. He's given me great advice on stuff, but that didn't resonate with something inside of me. So I think I'm going to be kindly saying, thank you for your time. I'm not following your advice on this. But again, that scaffolding externally, looking for credible external authority. Now, I will say about external authority, if you are Googling, is it okay that I look at porn? Is it healthy for a marriage that we blah, blah, blah? Google is not, Google's not a helpful external authority. Pick people who are taking the same journey as you, who have recoveries that you want to emulate. Um, in the middle stages, middle levels, the conventional morality. my thought here was, a lot of our morality is grounded in tradition, cultural practices, codes of conduct, um, which those of you in recovery, you may have some of that, like in your 12-step groups. Generally, here's how we define sobriety. Generally, here's how we conduct ourselves. Generally, here's how we work a program. Um, that is really, really helpful early on when you don't know what to do. What I'll see for folks in later stage recovery, and I'm not saying we've been at this for a year, I'm saying like folks who have been at this for decades, If recovery is going right, they mature and they develop. And those rigid codes of conduct may not be the life raft that they were before. They may not be as necessary as they were before. So Kohlberg's idea of these conventional stages, this is like teenage years and early adulthood. Um, a lot of us, if not all of us, we develop our significant relationships before we're done developing personally. So, in a non-addiction sense, I work with a lot of couples because I live in a state where there's a predominant religion. I work with a lot of couples who we would who term themselves as mixed faith. So they may have both started as part of this faith community, and one person may have at some point said, "Hey, not working for me anymore. I want to be on the outside of this." Um, that's not to say that in all cases, someone who decides to transition out of the faith of their childhood is at some higher stage of development, because it's not at all. But the point is, people develop, change, mature. We see the world differently. And in a mature relationship, we make room to reconfigure. We make room to get reacquainted. We make room to stay curious about each other. What I'll see in these mixed faith marriages, like 100% of the time, the initial feeling is, do we have the same values? If you don't believe in this, do you now think that robbing gas stations and having affairs is okay? Not always that exaggerated, but it's along those lines. Do we even want the same things now? And what I'll find in couples who can work through that successfully or work on that successfully, they realize that they can no longer have the external resources or the external sources of authority be the ones that they rely on for their personal code of conduct. They both have to grow up, and they both have to start looking, well, what do we feel is important? And we make our contract with each other based on that. So you have to, for maturity in a relationship, long term, you have to be willing to keep up with each other. You have to make that a top priority. If my black and white thinking is making things difficult for us, I really have to work on getting some color and some hue to that. And then in post-conventional morality, some places that I think this applies to recovery. And again, I'll see this for folks who I feel like turn the corner from like white knuckling, or couples who turn the corner from white knuckling and we're just policing to each other all the time. Is there's this real internalization, and where I'll see these couples say to each other, "There's nothing more important to me than our happiness, well-being, and safety. There's nothing more important to me than making sure you feel justly dealt with, that you feel like things are fair." And this is where largely impact therapy, I'm pushing couples to look early on, because I know they don't think this way, and I know they need to be challenged to think this way. So the big standout for me in the Kohlberg model, and how I think this relates to overall maturity in a relationship, is as I was saying, the earlier stages, these are the parts of us that we have to use to keep the bottom from falling. The later stages is how you really build a beautiful future together. How you build a relationship that doesn't just scrape by and survive, but creates an environment where both of you can thrive. So as I read the Kohlberg model, I think maturity in relationships has more to do with integration than it has to do with advancement. Because there are some things that you and your partner need to agree on. There is a law. It is wrong to break this law. There are some things. And so while you may have more capacity for nuance and this principle driven stuff, you also have the ability to accept that there are hard lines, there are rights and wrongs. And often what I'll see when I have presented these models to folks before, because everybody wants to be front of the class, you usually get somebody who says, "Oh, okay, well, it's about abstract thinking. Rules don't matter. I just have to have principles." That is not integrated. That is bypass. That is pseudo security. And so, as we're looking for the development of maturity, Kohlberg's model, I think, would have us look at, there are lots of different ways of thinking that we need to master. and discern which way of thinking is appropriate for the situation, not what's my personal preference. So I love how powerful principles can be. I think it's a really, really awesome way to live life. I think it's great for relationships. However, as I'm raising children from ages 14 to 2, there are hard and fast rules. We don't do this because it's against the rules that need to be in place. Because I've noticed when I say to even my teenage kids, okay, here's the general principle, go ahead and do that and everything will be okay. It's like, I don't know, someone who wants to pick up base jumping and their very first jump is like a 500-foot cliff and you just shove them off. There's not the internal scaffolding there to know what to do and to navigate themselves to the ground safely. So in our relationships, I would say Kohlberg's model has us looking at, or we must be able to look at in order to be mature, we also must be able to look at what is the appropriate way of thinking about this? What is the best way to handle this? And we're going to do what's best, not what either of our personal preferences. We're going to do what brings the greatest good to the greatest number of us in your relationship. That's, the two of you. Let me see if I missed any things. No, I think that's it for Kohlberg's model. So the takeaways: integration is what it's about. Lots of different ways of seeing the world, multiple lenses, looking to find the best fit for the situation, not the here's the rail that we will always run on.
Yeah, lots of great stuff. And even with what you just, ended with, what's the best way of thinking, what's the right way of thinking for us as a relationship. And neither of us, it may be that neither of us, it was exactly what either of us wanted. So it isn't like, well, you won last time, and so I'm going to win this time. It's like, if the compromise, if those nuances are best for the relationship. I often point out, you mentioned PACT, so that's Dr. Stan Tatkin's work. Big fan of his work as well. But I often point out the podcast that Dr. Rob and Dr. Stan did in January of 2019 called We Do. And I love that because it talks about if we're focusing on what's good for the relationship, then we both benefit. Like then we're in a healthier, happier relationship. And that what you just said feels like that really ties into that. If we're looking for the nuances of like, okay, it's not that black and white thinking of like my way or your way or, win and lose. It's like we're looking, at what's going to help us. It was really fascinating as you're talking about things, and you can see, and I can see the black and white thinking getting, stuck in that. I was also thinking about, early in my recovery, I needed like, and I remember like you mentioned like, we having to do things. I was like, I was going to a certain number of meetings a week, and I was so scared that if I missed one meeting, then the train was going to come off the rails, and obviously things change, and I actually did grow up, and I learned that well, that isn't going to make me run out and go crazy, so and then it was like, oh, okay, I didn't run out and go crazy. So that learning to develop and go, what do I really need in this moment? It may not be, doing that 12-step meeting or doing the gym or doing whatever. It may be I need to pay attention to the people that I'm in relationship with, and that was a lot of learning for me because, like, I would get into my little systems that really worked for me. And that's what it felt like in those earlier stages that you're talking about, is you find a system or an external voice, and I really love that you shared with the client that was able to listen and filter through and go, this does not resonate, even to a strong authority figure, grandparents, religiously, whatever. Like those are strong voices, and from childhood, that pull through. So that feels like a lot of healing and recovery for that person, that he's able to start internalizing, what do I need to do for me in this moment. And even having some freedom, I'm sure, to go, I may not do it perfectly, but I'm going to choose a different path. So and I did highlight too, um, uh, uh, that when you were talking about there's nothing more important than our happiness, I think we get so focused on my happiness, I need to be happy, and if we're really paying more attention to that that relationship or community or whatever, if we're looking at that, our happiness, I really believe, is uplifted the more, that whole system is, happy, so to speak. Okay, we have questions, but yeah, I
Yeah.
love all that stuff. Oh, you should take the medicine and leave the $2,000. So
Again, there's no wrong answer. You
yeah.
can see in that there's more complexity of thought than right or wrong. I'm not going to analyze this too much, but this could be like it's right for him to have the medicine, but not right for the pharmacist to have nothing. That's social contract.
Hmm.
So fun party games to have those imaginary scenarios and ask everybody, what should happen. You learn a lot about people.
As
And
long as you don't judge them for their
that's
answers,
right.
wherever
That's
they're
right.
at. Yeah. I
Yep.
can't be friends with you. You think differently than me. So, okay. How does neurodiversity impact capacity and
Mm.
capability for emotional maturity? My partner has severe ADHD, and with his high sensitivity, including RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, his impulsivity and deeply feeling wired nervous system can often come out sideways. And he says he's not in alignment with his desires of how he wants to be.
I love this question. I love this question. Number one, because it highlights how I experience most of my neurodiverse clients in relationships. While it may feel like this is the only way that I can think and be, there's often that like I can tell that this isn't working totally. I don't love this. I don't think I'm right. So here's the thing about neurodiversity, and this is one of the things I love about the PACT model. Everybody is capable of fairness, justice, mutual protection, all of that. Everybody's capable of that. It's a matter of number one, motivation, helping everybody find the right motives, the right story that helps them bring those principles to bear, and time and space. So if I look at the turning radius of different vehicles, every vehicle from a container ship, huge container ship, to a tiny little smart car is capable of turning 180 degrees. However, the space and time needed to accomplish that is different. So here's the thing with neurodiversity. Both parties have to come to an acceptance that adherence to the principles or the ability to regulate a nervous system enough to stop thinking about the fire that is going to get me and start thinking about the greater good. We may need a different environment. We may need to create something different than what automatically comes up for both. So when I'm working with folks who have ADHD, and rejection sensitivity dysphoria disorder is a common feature that we see in ADHD. What I see needing to happen is if we both know that that's on the table, we both know that that happens. We can't rush through. We can't rush through resolution. We can't rush through solving problems and overlook the sensitivities that might be there for one person. Why? Because that's not fair. It's not fair to either party. So in order to establish fairness, we slow down and we look for the rejection sensitivity. And we acknowledge, hey, I know that that came out insensitive. I'm sorry that hurt you. I'm your friend. I'm not trying to hurt you. And the person who is neurodiverse or has the rejection sensitivity disorder really works on the part of them that can say, I know this is my friend. I know I'm sensitive. I know I have thin skin. I know this makes things difficult. And neither takes on the full burden of the dust up. It's just like, I don't know. I think of my grandparents. My grandma had a stroke about 10 or 12 years before she passed. And it was pretty profound. This woman hand washed her own dishes up until the day they moved into a care facility. But they had to go from this. It is this long staircase that went up to their front door to this winding wheelchair ramp, um, because she couldn't do stairs safely, although she tried all the time. She was stubborn. um, Nobody has to apologize for the fact that we need a ramp. It's not anybody's fault that we need the ramp. It's simply, if we want to have this relationship, we have to make an accommodation that everybody can get to where we need to go. So with folks with neurodiversity, it takes coordination between both parties. Um, and that coordination is often we're saying, okay, we don't have speed on our side. We're not going to be able to do things fast, but we can do them well. There's extra conversations we have, there's extra rituals, extra recognitions. Um, and again, I love in that question, um, my spouse can feel this is not how they always want it. Like I said, that's the case with the vast majority of neurodiverse people. They can feel trapped in that prison. And the truth is, it's not a prison, it's just the world and everybody's expectations of how the world works was not built for you, fortunately. There's nothing wrong or broken in that your brain works that way. It's just we didn't build a society around brains that work that way, fortunately. We thought that whatever we term as neurotypical is that's how the vast majority of people are, and that's how it's going to work. And it's just not true. So that's the power you have in a coupleship. Society at large may not be friendly to your neurodiversity or your needs, but your coupleship on the two-person level certainly can be. You can build it to be whatever you need it to be, as long as it's based in reality and as long as the expectations you have of each other are fair.
So a few years ago, when I was on a webinar with you, you talked about a couple that you were working with, and this one really stuck because I was like, wow, what a beautiful, picture. But I remember you sharing that the partner, the betrayed partner, was, I have a vision for us, being able to do, whatever, and I recognize that you're not there yet, but I want to be able to work towards that. And I'm wondering if that kind of languaging of like, like we're going to slow it down, it's going to be incremental, and we can have this vision and hold that, for the two of us. Is something like that useful?
It's absolutely necessary,
Okay.
because I think you have to both be aligned on why we're slowing down, why we're getting sensitive. You both have to be aligned on, hey, neither of us see this as a burden or a non-necessity. If one of us was 7 feet tall, of course we would buy a non-standard mattress because it's not comfortable for you to sleep with a foot of your feet.
And you wouldn't buy a smart car. So
That's right.
okay, and I did put in the chat. So on this topic, Candace Christiansen,
Mm.
is her work is brilliant on this. Like these are the clients that she works with. She will be doing a special edition webinar on Wednesday, February 19th at 9:30 in the morning, Pacific time. And I would encourage anyone who's curious about this, wants more information. She'll be doing a presentation, and then she'll be there to answer questions. So I would welcome anyone that wishes to learn more to join. Okay, this is a great question. Why do addicts lack empathy? Why don't they follow rules because they don't want to hurt others? Why do they need an outside authority to stop them?
Um, from Kohlberg's, there's a lot of different answers to this, but from Kohlberg's stages of development, here's what I would say. Um, to me, sex addiction differs from a lot of other addictions in that I think that the trauma and the relationship wounding happens earlier with sex addicts. A lot of it's even pre-verbal. So, in order to progress through developmental stages, to grow as a person, to increase our ability to handle complexity in the world, you need a really caring, attentive environment around you to be able to do that. So, this is not an excuse for addicts who can't do this, but maybe more of a description. Um, there likely was never the safety and the opportunity around them to develop in those ways. So development doesn't happen chronologically. You don't wake up on your 12th birthday with a brain that's radically different than the one that you woke up with on your 11th birthday. Um, Development has to be gone through. It's like building muscle. Some process has to be happening inside for that to happen. So I would say simply, addicts are stunted in their emotional growth. So the external need for authority, I don't think about others. Um, I would say, of course, they think that way. And look at what a great solution addiction is to that. I have something that is all about me. I can even tell myself really easily, this hurts nobody else. Me. You hear those earlier stages of development. It's all benefit to me, no downside. Um, they have to be challenged to develop. They have to be challenged by their relationships. They have to be challenged by recognizing I can't just do whatever I want and get what I want. Um, and that takes a lot of different things. I've worked with guys before who have struggled with addiction, who have gotten sober, impeccably sober, I would say. Um, they're still not great in relationships because they always construct their relationships where they hold all the cards and there's no pain for them. There's very little they have to lose, so relationally things don't change. For those folks that I've worked with along those lines, if they don't have a partner who can say to them, "You will lose me. I'm not going to do this forever," um, then there's likely not going to be the enough pain and the right kind of pain to motivate any kind of change there. So development happens because we run into conflict in our environment, conflict that we're not equipped for, conflict that overwhelms us with pain, and we are forced to gain new abilities and new perspectives to then master our environment again. I hope that is a
It is, and yeah, I often share, particularly with partners, until the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same, no addict, and whether it's sex addiction or whatever, is going to change. We are so cemented to those, maladaptive coping mechanisms. This is what we know, and like you said, it's me. The other aspect of this is addiction and empathy cannot active addiction and empathy cannot be partnered, because if I'm actually paying attention and thinking about my partner, I wouldn't be able to do my compulsive behavior. So they have to be in those silos in order for that to continue. And addiction is a very demanding aspect where, like, it will I often say, for people who, and again, I don't want to sound trite, but for people who say, "Oh, I don't, like the higher power God stuff," I was like, yeah, in active addiction, our addiction is our higher power. We will do whatever it demands, and there's no, we have a false sense of that there's some bit of control with that. We don't, because we're going to do this stuff compulsively despite negative consequences. So until the consequences are painful enough, we will hang on to that. It's not fair, it's not right, it's horrible, and it's the reality. So, okay, at a certain point, after decades of dealing with a self-centered addict who is looking out only for themselves, a partner of said addict becomes way less likely to filter everything through the lens of what's good for the relationship. There's a time frame for the addict to make the partner happy because it's owed to that partner. It's restitution before you can get to the mutual what is good for the relationship stage.
I didn't see a question there, but
I don't either.
a couple
Yeah,
things I want to respond to. It is nobody's responsibility to make their partner happy. Here's how I
right.
see working in a relationship. It is our responsibility to take care of the impediments that we bring to the table that preclude mutual happiness. Happiness in a relationship is mutually constructed. Always, always, always. It's not owed to anybody. Um, so yeah, there is a time frame. There is a time frame, and I think the responsibility of both parties, if we cannot turn things around in the time frame before long-term memory, there's too much water under the bridge. We can't overcome this. I would say the mature thing to do is to let each other go. Um,
Yeah, I hear you. And yeah, otherwise you are stuck in miserable. Life is too short to do that. So, and I'm with you too with it. Like, I was like, I would not want the responsibility of making someone else happy. And I don't want them responsible. I am responsible
I
for
wouldn't want to
me.
put that responsibility in somebody else's hands. That's far too important. to
Well, and from my standpoint, they wouldn't do it right, so
that's right. That's right.
they
Well,
would not get all the nuances, so.
they wouldn't. Nobody knows your brain like you do.
Exactly. Oh, and it's a scary place. Okay. Hi, when should relational healing happen? My SA husband says he can't focus on how his behavior hurt our relationship and me until he has his sobriety in a good place. I feel abandoned for 15 years of acting out, and I feel abandoned in the way he feels recovery should go. Any thoughts? I get the suspicion that this is pretty early on. Do you agree or?
Yeah, I mean, I do get that. I differ from fortunately less and less of my CSAT colleagues, but time was we used to say, relationship healing happens later. And I've seen a lot of relationships die on the vine. Here's the relationship I see between this. What you're reporting your addicted husband is saying, I think is true. I think it's hard to focus out on stuff outside of yourself until you're in a grounded place. However, here's a benefit that being conscious of and facing the consequences in a relationship faces. Um, if you are faced with the loss of a relationship because you cannot get your act together, if you understand that I can't just do whatever I want here, I can't take my own sweet time. I have a partner, I have children depending on me. Um, that can provide some booster fuel, that can provide some motivation. Again, at the bottom of it, pain is our best motivator. The pain of anticipated loss, the pain of anticipated, we will never be able to be the same again. So, relationship work that I see for couples early on is not necessarily healing the relationship, it's coming to reality. Hey, this thing's not bulletproof. You guys don't always, nobody has a gun to their head. Nobody's here because they have to be. So looking at establishing things like fairness, justice, mutual power, mutual protection, not only is that great for relationships, it's awesome for individual recovery too. So right now you can hear me, I'm appealing to that second stage self-interest. For the addict who is struggling to focus on the relationship stuff, you'll have an easier time recovering if you put out some of the fires in your relationship. If you learn how to treat each other well, even if you don't feel like doing it. It's the smarter thing to do. As Stan Tatkin would say, it's the dumbest thing in the world to go to war with the person you're sharing a foxhole with. So if you're overwhelmed by early recovery, I would invite you to think about how your neglect of your relationship is contributing to that overwhelm, and maybe move it a little higher up the list because it will make things easier for you personally.
Well, and I just put in for Betray Partners. There was a Betray Partner work group that started on Tuesday, and there is still an opportunity to join them. I've added other people, so please consider that. That's a really good. All of our work groups are online, 90 minutes per week, live facilitated, but it's solid information, including healthy boundaries and communication skills and all of those type of things. Separately, Sex Addiction 101 starts tomorrow. Out of the Doghouse for Men Who've Been Caught Cheating. I don't remember the date on that one. I didn't look that one up, but they're all on Seeking Integrity under the work group tab. And I was thinking with this though, yeah, it's a balance, and if there is floundering for the addict, we then a higher level of help to get that solid foundation. That's what our residential treatment program provides. Like they, after 14, 21, or 28 days, they have a solid foundation, they have a plan, and they have some skills. They're not going to get a graduate degree in empathy, but they're going to have some better ways of handling things and the support to be more successful in it. So if what's happening now isn't enough and working, then talk to your qualified professionals. If you don't have one, Tammy, TAMI at seekingintegrity.com. Let me know where you're located and I'll help you find things. We've got just a ton of resources. You don't have to stay stuck in pain. We want to help you move through it. So please reach out. Okay, so the next question, if I'm understanding this, mother enmeshment keeps you stuck in the first stage. Knowing this, what is the best solution for working with your partner?
I actually made a note on this when I was preparing notes. I actually think mother enmeshment precludes you from moving into post-conventional. Because
Oh,
stages
wow.
1 through 4 are focused on externality. So I don't just see enmeshed men who see mother as the ultimate authority figure. They can even have the whole family, so they can be doing that law and order thing, but the ultimate law is the mother, the ultimate law is the family, rather than the self. Um, so I think lack of development of a self, which is what we see in mother enmeshment, the parent as the higher power, as Ken Adams would put
Oh,
it,
yeah.
you won't progress into the social contract. You won't progress into the nuances. Yesterday, I was doing, we call it coffee with Ken and coffee with Jon. We have guys who have been through the program. They get together on a 90-minute call. Everybody shares a success and a struggle, and then we refresh on some principles for enmeshment recovery. And it was really beautiful for a couple of the guys that I've now gotten to know and track their stories over the years doing this. One guy talked about being able to forgive his mother, and
Hmm.
um, it was interesting because I've watched his progress. I watched his anger and his grievance ignite with her the first time he gave himself permission to be angry about what she had done, and it was valid. It was real. And then through a series of events and things he was thinking about, he realized this anger he has towards his mother is preventing other things that he wants. He was listening to an audiobook on a road trip as he came to this realization. He said, I pulled over the car and I said, Mom, I forgive you. And
Wow.
he said, I felt
Wow.
this freedom. Um, and then he said later on, a couple days later, he was reflecting on what he knew about his parents' childhoods, and he said, I felt love and compassion for them, and again, I felt freedom. Whereas for an enmeshed man steeped in enmeshment, the love and compassion is through the avenue of his obligation, so there's not going to be freedom when you feel obligation. The point is, this guy became himself. He got his differentiated life. And so he could apply these universal principles of love and compassion. He could even apply that towards his mother, who arguably um, took a lot from him. He could apply that because he was his own person, not because anything had changed with mom. And so I think the best solution for working with your partner who's enmeshed in these early stages, again, as much of a pressure there may be in you, for your partner to show up right for you, to give you the empathy and all that you arguably deserve. You have lots and lots of space to an encouragement for your partner to say, what do you think? What are you feeling now? I want you to develop yourself. You and I can figure out whether that works for us later, but you got to get that piece in place, man. I'm so excited to meet the real you. Um, that's how you can help somebody who has lived a life. I would call it like under an oppressive regime. Is you show them, you remind them again and again, you have freedom here, you have latitude. I may not like what you do with that freedom or latitude, but that should not prevent you from developing it. I can handle my own disappointment. It's okay if who you become is ultimately disappointing to me, if who you become is true. That makes sense.
It
That's
does, but I'm thinking, man, as a betrayed partner who's going like the previous question was, I feel abandoned because he's been, gone for. How do you, as a betrayed partner, have the vision to be able to hold the space like that?
well, this is where, so Ken and I are developing this idea more. We're very, very grateful to the CSAT and the sex addiction community for kind of being the nest that enmeshment grew in. But the betrayal from enmeshment and the betrayal from intimate betrayal are not the same. And the genesis is not the same. Enmeshment is a developmental trauma, much like childhood sexual abuse. So while the feelings of being betrayed are valid, you have been. It's like turning to your partner who is abused sexually as a child, who just can't fully bring themselves and saying, you owe me the world because you took it from me, because that would never fly. That just doesn't make sense. There's disappointment and there's loss that both parties in the coupleship, when there's enmeshment, they have to be willing to face together. We have lost a great deal as a result of this. As my colleague Aaron Weiss Warren puts it, both of you were betrayed by his mother. Um, and so I can see the difficulty there. There's growth for both the enmeshed person and their partner. Um, and I think that's part of that higher order thinking for both of us. Uh, is, we both lost a great deal. We didn't know what we didn't know going in this. A great deal was taken from both of us. Um, it's not just my poor enmeshed partner is struggling in these early stages and I've got it together. Our relationship context has a lot to do with what we present maturity. And I think it's almost like a magnet syndrome. If one of us is in these earlier stages, the relationship is in, and we both have to grow it. Again, based on what is needed, not necessarily what we prefer or what's most comfortable
Okay. Next question. Piggybacking off neurodiversity, how do we differentiate between slow progress and recovery because of limitations versus slow progress because of lack of willingness, integration, commitment, etc.? Worried about neurodivergence being used as a rationalization because I've seen my partner use it as a cop out in other contexts.
for. Yeah. Again, a neurodiverse person can get a sponsor and make phone calls to them. A neurodiverse person can do step work and can get accountable. And so when I think of the slowness, the limitness, like if you have ADHD, for example, um, there's a higher degree of impulsivity there that's biological, and it's a steeper slope to climb. However, the willingness to reach out to somebody after I've been compulsive, the willingness to get accountable, the willingness to address deficits in my boundaries has nothing to do with neurodivergent issues. So I would say the differentiation is there a program that is being worked? That's available to everybody. There may need to be some modification. For example, some folks with severe ADHD again may have a hard time reading, or if they have dyslexia, well, there's audio stuff you can sit down and learn from people orally. Like, so there may be some accommodations, but that I can find a program that works and that I can work. Everybody can do that.
Yeah, well, it's like with our work groups, it's psychoeducation. So there's, some lecture, but there's interaction and homework and all of those things, and so that you're getting it in multiple levels. So, okay, please explain discovery, rage vented at partner. Since discovery, my addict has been absolutely over the top, abusive, condescending, sabotaging, insulting, vengeful, demeaning, a level of meanness, attack, etc. He even beat me the day after I managed to run away. I confronted him about finances, discovery of his lifelong acting out, lies, and child abuse. It has been crippling and emotionally toxic that I had to take drastic measures. I have moved to detachment, self-protection, no contact, and even a restraining order. How can an addict vent such anger, blame, and rage at a partner after what they have done to myself, my children for over 25 years? My partner was moved from covert into overt overnight.
That's not an addict. That's an abusive sociopathic person. There's the answer to that. That is someone who is more concerned with their power and their ability to run their own life than anybody else. So getting away and getting a restraining order was the right answer. Stay away and keep learning how to build a safe life for yourself.
Yeah, that painful. I'm so glad you're out, and yeah, take whatever measures you need to. I'm the betrayed partner raised by narcissistic mother, and as a husband is mother enmeshed. What is the impact on our adult son? How bad is my son messed up, and how can I convince him to go get into therapy?
I
That's
mean,
such like, well, there's a lot. Like, and I
great
was like, wow,
questions.
yeah, yeah,
Great questions today. The answer to the first two is ask him. In best case scenario, you and your partner together come together and say, "Hey, we want to know what was it like growing up in our house. What do you continue to think about? What proverbially keeps you up at night?" This is the kind of restitution. None of us come from perfect backgrounds. We pass crap on to our kids despite our best efforts. This is the restitution for our inadequate parenting or the chaos that was in our family growing up. That the restitution is we can turn and face it, and we invite you to come in and do that too. We're not self-protecting anymore. We're not interested in living in chaos. We're interested in healing. So for the first two, I would ask. There's also good books. that could give you an idea of what might be going on, and it might shed some light on yourself too. The book, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, can be really helpful. Ken Adams' book, A Light in the Dark, um, The Hidden Legacy of Adult Children of Sex Addicts. This is a hard look. I think in some of his research that he's done with adult children, this is hard on betrayed partners, not intentionally, but because the way the kids see it in his research, by and large, the kids don't see, for example, like dad was this bad addict and mom was a victim. They see mom and dad failed me.
Mm.
When the adult children in these addictive systems talk about what would be healing, in his preliminary research, it was like 9 out of 10 said, I just want to be unburdened from the responsibility. I want to hear from mom and dad, this was our fault. We know this was our failing. It has nothing to do with you. Um, so the convincing to get into therapy, that's a harder one. And I would just start with that idea of unburdening. Give your kid that gift of, we know we had problems. We know we weren't perfect. We will work on it. We are going to work on it. And again, you give the kid room after that to
Can a SA husband who is mother enmeshed show up like that?
yeah. I mean, none of those are precluding. I think it takes some good, solid recovery. I think it takes being able to pull your head out of your own pain, your own world, and realize there, as far as kids in a system where there's addiction and stuff like that, there's the victims are the children. Everybody else started the relationship with some kind of choice, even if they didn't know what they were signing up for. Kids had no choice to enter the family. That was a decision the parents made. And so, if you can turn and look at the least empowered people in the system are the children, and I can do something about that. Yeah, I think someone who is working on their addiction recovery and their enmeshment recovery can give that. And like I said, that's best case scenario that both mom and dad come. I think it's also helpful to hear from one parent. Hey,
Yeah.
none of this is your fault. Yeah.
Yeah. We're out of time. Thank you all. And we'll see you in, I don't remember, 2 weeks. Bye, everyone.
I